I've been so excited to record this episode. It's not often you get to do a podcast with your boss and also speak about my passion of estuaries, which was definitely from you because I wanted to do the deep sea ocean when I started my undergrad, and I didn't think anything about these estuaries as more than probably that maybe dirty.
A puddle?
Yeah, a puddle, dirty stink water, like nothing much is in there. When I grew up fishing them, I knew there was fish and everything in there, but I didn't realise the ecological importance and how cool and fascinating they are till you got me to do the first project as an undergrad in the ISC in Toby's Inlet down in Dunsborough.
Oh, yeah.
And then obviously since then I haven't left your side.
So how come it's been 6 years before I've had an invite?
Well, there was also 6 years without doing podcasts. So
that's a very valid excuse.
This production was recorded at the podcast studios in the Media Arts Centre at Murdoch University. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Murdoch University. Any content provided by the hosts and guests are their personal opinions and are not intended to represent the views or opinions of the university, its administration, faculty, or staff. Now we have that out of the way, let's talk science. Paramount importance.
Already just little brief chats before this, hearing a lot of things that I did not know about estuaries. So your wealth of knowledge is definitely global. Someone asked me the other day when I was saying I was going to do an interview with you about estuaries. They said, "Oh, don't you know a lot about estuaries anyway?" And I said, "Oh, I know like a little bit about the Southwest Australian estuaries, but globally I don't. You're the more of a global expert of estuaries, very well renowned for estuaries, and so that's also why I'm so excited to be able to speak to you and really pick your brain."
Well, hopefully I live up to the hype.
Well, you already do. All right. Well, let's get the ball rolling.
Sure.
So what is an estuary and what is the definition of an estuary? Why is it so contentious?
All right. Well, that is a whopper to start with.
Yes.
So I think when we want to define definitions, it's kind of good to go back and have a look at what the word actually means. Where was the word derived? What's its etymology, right? And if you go to Native America, some of the Native American tribes, their word of an estuary translates to the in-between land.
Right.
Right. So it is this ecosystem that is between the land and the sea, because it's not the sea and it is not land, right? So they called it the in-between.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense, really, right? And then there was an English geologist, Lyell, who in the 1800s basically called it where the river meets the sea, right? And he used the word tide, where the river meets tidal waters. The reason he used the word tide is the word estuary comes from the Latin estuarium, which comes from the Latin estuus, which means tide, right? So you got this in-between land where the river meets the tide, right? And so we kind of lived with those definitions. And then in the 1950s, they had a massive conference in America and they came up with a definition for an estuary. So, humans have been on this planet for millennia.
Yeah.
And in 1950s, we came up with a definition for an estuary, right? And because it's so contentious and because they're different all over the world, it took a gathering of hundreds of scientists to sit in a room and argue it out to come up with the Pritchard definition.
Right.
So, that definition goes along the lines of a partially enclosed body of water where fresh water is measurably diluted by seawater, right? But that doesn't work. That's a very Northern Europe, North American centric view. So people in the Southern Hemisphere changed that definition in the late 80s. And they added that the estuary can be disconnected from the ocean and that it can be saltier. So it doesn't have to be measurably diluted. So now the current definition that we use in the Southwest is 71 words long in one sentence. It's a bit of a mouthful.
Yes. It's very quite hard to recite off the top of your mind when someone asks.
Yeah. So it's
what is an estuary?
It is tricky, but I guess the main points are you have water coming in from the land, but it's not necessarily fresh water, right? Because the water that comes off our land isn't always fresh. It has to go into some kind of semi-enclosed area, but that area does not have to be open to the sea all the time. It can close off. So they use the word like periodically disconnected. And this whole measurably diluted thing, it can be, but it can also become saltier than seawater. And that's probably something that we'll talk about a bit later.
Why is it important to have a definition?
I think people need to know what they're talking about and comparing something to something.
Yeah.
You know, like if I said to you, what's a fruit, right? You know what the main fruits are. There'll be debate about certain things that we consider fruits that aren't fruits.
Yeah.
Right. But it's good to know that you're talking about roughly the same thing.
Yeah.
And in the terms where science meets law, which is happening more and more, in a court of law, there has to be a legal definition. Right? Otherwise, you're not talking about the same thing. So that's important when we're talking about legislation in estuaries and particularly maintaining good health of systems. In certain parts of the world, it's illegal to have a polluted estuary. But in order to, enforce that legislation, you need to know what is pollution and what is an estuary. Otherwise, someone could potentially say, that's toxic as, not an estuary, it's a river. Therefore, I'm off the hook.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's important from translating science, making sure that we as people who live on the planet do science, know what we're talking about, but also in enforcement and legislation.
In that case, it would be very important to know where the estuary starts and finishes.
Absolutely. That is another really contentious question. So if we kind of think back to these definitions of, an estuary is where the river meets the sea and where there's a tide. Well, for those estuaries that closed off, it wouldn't be an estuary because there is no tide. The sand would stop the tide. But some of the definitions for an estuary call the upper limit where tide goes. Right? The other major school of thought for the upper part of an estuary is where the salinity gets to 0.1 gram per litre, right? Or 0.1 ppt.
Right, very hard for a lot of estuaries in our area where we've got secondary salinisation or salty rivers.
Absolutely, yeah. The estuary would go into the wheat belt.
Yeah.
So that clearly doesn't work for here. But neither really does the tide because when our estuary is closed off, there is no tide. And just to throw another spanner in the works, there's these components of an ecosystem called tidal freshwater wetlands. Right. So these are areas of very fresh water. So kind of below that 0.1, but they're tidal. Right.
Right. Like Gardner, those that
we don't get them in the southwest.
Oh, okay.
Really? Because they would fail on the salinity grounds of not being fresh water.
Right.
Right. But they also need that tidal input. So you get these areas where you have very large tidal ranges and large amounts of water coming down. Enough that where the tide penetrates right into fresh water and moves in and out. So it looks just like, a salt marsh, only the salinity is 0.
Right. But what's the tidal input? It's just like moving that water.
Yeah.
Right. But the salinity is not changing.
No, the salinity is fresh always, but it's Fairbridge called his definition of an estuary the upstream limit of tidal water movement. Right. So in this case, you have a freshwater environment that's tidal.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Lake Gardner is like that. Like it was fresh water when the tide was moving, but it was like just pushing the water in and out into that lake system. And in a sense, like even Norman's Inlet was a little bit like that. Like the upper part when it was moving, it was just the fresh water being pushed in. Well, the upper part was just fresh water being pushed in, moved by the tide when it was breached. But yeah, obviously it's a bit different to what
I'm talking meters of movement in the tidal freshwater wetlands.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, not what we got.
Yeah. You're probably talking like centimeters.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we're in a part of the world where there isn't a huge tide, so
yeah.
It's not to discount what you saw. It's just like a lower limit because there's smaller tide.
Yeah. Right. Where is that?
North America.
Yeah. Okay.
Europe. And those tidal freshwater wetlands are actually pretty productive. And the bigger the tidal range, the bigger the productivity. So they're actually really important. they're actually really under threat as well.
Right.
Because if we have shifting rainfall patterns, they're no longer a total freshwater wetland. The fact the tide goes up there means you can get salt water going up there.
And that's going to change the community a lot.
Exactly. So they're calling it estuarine squeeze is the new term in the literature.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's the same as coastal squeeze, but just further up.
Right. What's coastal squeeze?
Coastal squeeze, if we talk about climate change, we'll come back to that. So coastal squeeze is where you lose that belt of coastal land because sea level rise gets rid of it.
Ah, okay.
And of course, we actually play a big role, well, not you and I personally, but we as humanity play a big role in coastal squeeze as well in clearing some of those habitats. So those kind of processes like rising sea level, loss of habitat, in this case, rather than being at the bottom of the estuary or along the coast, it's right at the top. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard that term. Very interesting.
Yeah, I only coined about 5 years ago.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's still getting out there then.
Yeah.
So why are estuaries?
Oh, sorry, we haven't done the bottom of an estuary.
Oh yeah, the bottom of the estuary.
Yeah. See, this just shows how complex as what an estuary is. So, let's take the Swan.
Yeah.
Right. We put a port at the end of the Swan River. Seaway O'Connor blew up the rock bar at the mouth there. So it's fairly obvious where that is. You can look along the coastline, you can see demarcation. And in fact, for most estuaries in the southwest that your listeners would have been to, it's fairly easy to determine the limits. People may have been to Wilson Inlet in Denmark. You know, there's a lookout there. You can look along the beach, see a big sandbar or a little channel going through. It's obvious that's the end. For those of you listeners who have gone up north, where the end of an estuary is a far more contentious debate.
So these are the deltas where there's multiple little streams and it gets blown out into the ocean.
And also the bigger gulfs as well. So the classic example is, say, the Rio de Plata. So that's one of the biggest estuaries in the world. It borders Uruguay and Argentina, I think. And that's got a really, when that flows, you just Google it, you'll see this brown water that comes out of the estuary, right? That could be full-strength seawater, but brown. That's that suspension load, right? So that kind of fanning out and release of water is what makes kind of an estuary and an estuary, right? It's that transition point from water on the land to water in the sea. So you've got to find an end to that. The problem is the more water you have, the further it pushes out. But water isn't the same amount of water all the way through the year. So the extent of that plume changes. So what we have to do is work out, well, where does that plume end? Right? So there are various parts. Different people argue different things. The UK has a pretty, it's a very specific definition, but hey, definitions probably should be specific. But they came up with this for the River Severn. So the River Severn is between Wales and England. So you've got Devon, Cornwall, Somerset on the English side, Wales on the northern side, and that estuary gets 15 meters of tide a day on a spring tide.
It's hard to fathom. I know you just went there and sent me the pictures, and it's just, for someone that's never seen a tide bigger than 4 meters and spent all my time working in about half a meter of tide, a 15-meter tide is
So
insane.
we're going for around about a 4-story building is 13 to 16 meters.
Right. That's massive.
Yeah. So you can see that when the tide's in or out, depending on the river flow, the edge of the estuary is going to change. Right. So they came up with a rule, which is it's the end of the estuary is where the salinity is 95% of seawater, which is about 33 parts per thousand for 95% of the time. So it's like mostly estuarine for most of the year. And that's how they define the upper limit.
Right. And this is in the plume that's outside, say, the demarcation of like the end.
So that's where they work out where that demarcation is. Right. So there will be times.
Oh, so it's not a morphological demarcation.
No, it's based on salinity. You can't, like, if you go look at the Severn estuary, like it goes to technically, you got the Bristol Channel at the end of it, it goes to like the end of Wales and the end of England. Right. Lots of that is pure ocean.
Right.
Right. So there's no geomorphological boundary. Just think about a funnel. At what point in the funnel do you cut it off? Right. And you can have the same things up in the north. Like, where does the Fitzroy end?
Mm.
You know, it's really tricky. So they've solved that because they need a definition to go, well, where does the estuary end? Where does the ocean start? 95% of seawater and 95% of the time.
That would be quite confusing for our estuaries in the sense of like, say, Waichinacup or the Swan, where it's like the mouths of those estuaries are pretty much seawater for 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So they are where we've called, like, could be a morphological demarcation. It's the end of a geological boundary, but that's like almost seawater all the time. So in that definition, that would not be the end of our estuaries.
No, it would be fairly close. But, different people use different start and end points based on their situation.
Yeah.
So in our case, the tidal one doesn't work because some of our estuaries get cut off by the tide.
Yeah.
Right. And the salinity one doesn't work because of secondary salinisation and natural geology.
And this is why it's so contentious.
None of our estuaries are estuaries.
Yeah.
But they are. And so I think we tend here to use the upper limit of tidal intrusion when the bar is open.
Yeah.
So you can put caveats like.
Well, when
like
we were
that.
measuring estuaries, that's what we use is where the tidal limit would push to. And then same as the lower limits as well. Well, I'm going to move on from that and go to why, since we're talking about estuaries, why are they so ecologically important?
Yeah. So estuaries have a number of goods and services that they do for us. And those goods and services have a long history of linking with humanity. Right. So they do a lot of things for us that we don't have to do. And if we lost those, we would then have to do them. Think about drinking water, right? We can take it from a dam, but if there's no dam, we got to get it from somewhere else, or we could get it from the ground, whether we're then paying to pump it up, or we could use desal. We're then paying the energy and infrastructure to do that. So estuaries have a number of services that they provide for us: coastal defense and clean water. Nutrient recycling are all big ones, and cultural use as well. There are lots of people around the world. Estuaries have a special attachment to them. It's not only you and I that like them. And then they also have things that you can exploit from them, like fisheries. That could be shellfish as well as finfish. Oysters, mussels, clams, that kind of stuff, prawns, crabs.
What is nutrient recycling?
Yeah, okay. So nutrient recycling is when you break down whatever waste material you have and convert that into something else, right? So just imagine, even if estuaries didn't do that, imagine just never flushing your toilet, right? Keep going to the toilet and it's looking back at you every time, right?
Yeah.
You need something to break that down. So what estuaries have is a bunch of bacteria and larger species that will first fragment the woodies. This could be like woody debris that comes down into the system, break that down, and then the chemicals in there will be recycled through things like the nitrogen cycle. And then they're in more bioavailable terms for use by other things.
Right. I think the nitrogen cycle, just a quick rundown of.
I couldn't tell you.
No, okay.
Not a chemist.
Okay. Is it? But that's essentially like, so I know we use the term estuaries are a sink of organics. So everything that falls in from the catchment ends up into an estuary. Then, as you said, it's broken down through bacteria, but it's also like through invertebrates that biotermulate the sediment and everything in there.
Yeah.
And you said it makes it more available for other plants and everything to then uptake in their nutrients, produce photosynthesis.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of processes that go on. And because estuaries are this middle zone, you get stuff that comes down from the catchment and also stuff that comes in from the ocean as well. So you get nutrients coming in from both ends. You also get a little bit from the top as well, atmospheric nitrogen and things like that. So there's nitrogen in the air that through wind mixing goes into the water as well. Right. We don't think about it, right? But anyone who's gone scuba diving would know that you can get, nitrogen narcosis.
Yeah.
And the bends, and that's because the partial pressures of these gases get too high because there's nitrogen in the air. So, we think about it as like fertilizer or stuff that we add, but it's in all the air that we breathe as well.
Yeah.
So that gets washed in. So you got those kind of three inputs. You were spot on with saying that they're a sink, right? Because in our estuaries, with our lack of tides, the stuff goes in and then settles out in the calm waters of an estuary into the bottom, right? So you've got all these nutrients coming from the inside. From the outside to the inside. And you've also got the production of nutrients from internally within the estuary as well. So people go to the banks of an estuary. You often see, say, mangroves, melaleucas, the paperbark trees here. You get reed beds, salt marshes, and then in the water itself, you can have seagrass beds. Well, they're all primary producers, right? So they're using some of the nutrients and also producing nutrients at the same time. But then or macroalgae as well. Then those bits of those plants will drop off into the water and then be recycled by the animals that's there, together with the leaves that have come down from the catchment or phytoplankton that's washed in from the ocean and lived out its life as well. So there'll be worms in the bottom that were we call them non-selective deposit feeders, which is just kind of like a really hungry person at an all-you-can-eat buffet. You just or a whale shark, you just kind of open your mouth, chow through whatever goes in, and then they poop out sand. So that helps take up a lot of those nutrients and turn them into energy for the animal. But as you go deeper into the soil, the sediment at the bottom of the estuary, there is no oxygen. Right? If anyone's gone to the beach and dug a hole, you had the yellow sand on top, the black sand underneath. That smells, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Like rotten eggs.
Like rotten eggs, yeah. And that's hydrogen sulfide, right? And that's where you get anaerobic respiration. So it's when you're training for your Ironmans and your triathlons, you get a stitch. That's your body going for anaerobic respiration. You produce lactic acid as a product of that. And that's why you're like, oh, damn. Ooh. And you breathe and it goes away, right? Breathing's not magic. You just switch back to aerobic respiration.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's what's going on in the sediment. Those animals, and particularly the bacteria, can live in that anoxic environment and help recycle nutrients as well.
Right. If they have too much, they can die off, right? It can be too much for them. It'll be like a limit because that's one of the big problems of estuaries is eutrophication.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. It depends on the species. So the harsher the conditions, generally the smaller the animals are that live there. And then you get what they call the extremophiles. Right. And these are these animals that can live, normally bacteria or archaea, that live in the world's worst environments. So it could be areas of no oxygen estuaries. It could be salt lakes. It could be in space. And there's lots of research into these extremophiles because that's obviously how we'll find life on another planet.
Yes. Yeah.
It may not be ET. It may be a bacteria.
Yeah. Well, the tardigrades, I remember hearing about them and that was insane.
The water bears.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to the ecosystem services because we usually use 3 different types. There's economic, ecological, and social.
Yeah, so those are the broader overarching aims. Or I guess 3 different windows with which you can look at any kind of ecosystem in what it does for us.
Yeah, yeah. So the economic, because I know we using the term the Peel Harvey estuary is a $20 billion estuary. And that's the amount of services that it provides economically for humans. And then I guess the socials, the amenities like rec fishing and everything like that. And then ecological, obviously, is nature-based things. Can we go into a bit more detail about the ecological roles an estuary plays? So we've talked about nutrient recycling, but there's nurseries for fish, for avian fauna as well. They come a lot of migratory birds use estuaries and their flight paths. And I'm sure that the terrestrial bugs, we've just delved into that a lot lately, finding a lot of bugs using estuaries for their larvae phase, which then also then the terrestrial fauna that eat on them. So it's not just things that live inside the estuaries, it's things that live in the air and in the natural areas around it too. I think one of the observations that we looked at when one of the estuaries that we saw just sort of depleted was the lack of other life around the estuary. Like we said, when the estuary was in dire straits, we didn't see any birds there, didn't see any animals on the edges. It was just everything sort of like it kind of looked like the ecosystem outside the estuary was collapsing as well when we lost the estuary. Well, we didn't lose the estuary, but
temporarily
lost the estuary. So, yeah, what are some of these other roles that estuaries play for? I think
that's a great question. So yeah, one of the much vaunted attributes of an estuary is as a nursery area for fish and invertebrates. So, in order to grow up, you need shelter and you need food. And with those two things, you become less able to be eaten, right? We are top predators. We don't worry about going down the road and getting eaten by something else. But pretty much every other animal worries about that. Even if you're a white shark, right? There's a bigger white shark around when you're juveniles, right? So the habitats that an estuary provides, seagrass beds, shellfish reefs, mangroves, salt marsh, as a little fish, you can go hide in there, right? As an invertebrate, you can hide in there. But at the same time, those plants are going to be depositing leaves, using nutrients, ordering that nutrient cycle from earlier, providing food for those invertebrates, right? So the invertebrates get food and shelter. The juvenile fish can go in there to get shelter and food as well, but they're in turn not going to be eaten by the bigger fish because we don't tend to have the bigger fish in estuaries.
Or piscivorous fish. We got very low amount of piscivorous fish.
Yeah.
In southwest Australia. I'm actually not sure about other. I know northern Western Australia there's a lot.
But yes, I mean there are more than there are here, but whether that's a natural thing or a human thing,
okay,
it's kind of hard to tell. But in lots of estuaries around the world, there are not big predators in estuaries. Yes, there's the exception. But if you look at the number of fish in an estuary, it's normally not those top level predators. Yes, they may come in from time to time. I mean, technically, most elasmobranchs are not very good at tolerating salinity, bull shark aside. So, when you're in the fresher parts of an estuary, there's not going to be sharks there because they just don't like it. So you've got lots of shelter, lots of food. The other thing is in those estuaries where you have big tides, you have suspended sediment, right? So I grew up in London. We have the River Thames that has a 6 to 8 meter tidal range. Everyone tells me that estuary is dirty because it's brown. That's just the suspended sediment in the estuary. So you'll get sediment that comes down from the river and the tide will move the sediment from the sediment up into the water column. Well, lots of fish are visual predators. So if the water is cloudy as, how are you going to find your prey? Right? So you've got lots of food, shelter, predators can't see you. Also, for those, not all fish live in estuaries all their life, but those that do and have a marine population as well, we know that the growth rates for those fish in the estuary are higher.
Because of the high productivity?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if we could just eat and eat and eat all day, we would put on weight, right? Humans don't grow throughout their life in height like fish do. But if you're a juvenile fish, you want to get as much food into you early as you can because the bigger you are, the bigger something has to be to eat you, right? Because we call fish generally gate-limited predators. You can only eat what fits in your mouth, like no hands, no cutlery. So, the growing quickly is really key. So those are all the elements that make estuaries wicked places to grow up if you're a little fish.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. Personally, I haven't thought about it. Well, I've thought about it very deeply, yes, but that was a great way to synthesize a huge topic into a smaller.
No, thanks. Nothing in estuaries is
well, it's why you're
simple.
a lecturer as well. Yeah. Well, so why are they important to humans as well then for us?
Yeah, good question. Ever heard of a city called Tokyo?
Yes.
Yeah, Joe was called before Tokyo.
No.
Endo.
Right.
Yeah, which is actually like meaning estuary.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, that's what I read online.
Interesting.
So yeah, for a long time, Tokyo is the world's most populated city. Humans have had a long history of affinity with estuaries, And it comes down to those same things that the fish need is kind of what we need as humans. Like we want access to fresh water, right? That's our most pressing concern. Don't drink for a couple of days. We don't do very well. We then need food, right? So we got our water. We can go fishing in the estuary for abundant fish supplies, clams, mussels, right? You can just look at the cultural significance of some of the middens around the world. Lots of shellfish, crabs in there. But we can also farm on the banks of estuaries, right? So estuaries are supposed to flood, right? The Swan estuary here in Perth, that flooded a lot. And one of the reasons Seaway kind of blew the bar up was to stop the flooding, right? So more water will go out to sea. But that flooding of land takes nutrients and puts them on the soil around an estuary. So the floodplains around estuaries have been some of the richest areas for growing crops. So you've got your food, your meat and your veg sorted out. You've got access to water. What are you going to need? Well, you're going to need material to build houses, right? Or some kind of infrastructure. So you've got the wood and the forests around there. Then what do? Well, you go, if I can build a house, I can build a boat. So now you can go exploring for other areas, meet other, tribes, groups of people, establish trade routes, right? It's far easier to float something to someone than it is to carry it. So then you had the trade establishing, right? All these cities connected by waterways. And then we built on top industry. Once we had the Industrial Revolution, we could, mass produce things. Then you got industry around the estuaries. That, with all the food, resources, jobs, you then need all the houses. And before you know it, the estuary is an absolute hub of people. So I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Right. What do you reckon is the most populated estuary, and how many people? We'll ground it in the population of Australia is somewhere between 27, 28 million.
Right. Well, I was going to straight away go to either China or India, just being one of the most popular places in the world.
Yep.
So I would still have to choose one of those, probably in China.
Yeah. You on the one?
I don't know the estuary names though, so.
Yeah. So there is the Pearl River Delta.
Okay.
Yep.
That one.
And around that is 9 megacities, the biggest of which has 17 million people in 2022.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Add the population of those 9 cities together, just the cities, 86 million people.
Around one estuary.
Around one. It's a pretty big estuary, right?
Yeah.
Well, but around one estuary.
Like almost 4 Australias, or 3, essentially 3 Australias.
Yeah, 3 and a bit Australias around one estuary. Just goes to show the importance of estuaries for all of those reasons.
This is going to be a hard question for you, but how big is that estuary?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It's
in relative size.
It's pretty big. It's up there.
Like, would it be a lot bigger than the Peel Harvey?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
To some extent, that kind of depends where we draw the line for an estuary.
Yeah.
But I can talk about the biggest estuary in the world later on, because it's not that estuary.
Right. Okay. I want to ask one question before that, because we've already touched base on it very closely. So majority of the biggest cities in the world, they're around estuaries for those exact reasons you just said.
Yeah. So for a lecture I wrote the other day, I went back and I had a look at the 11 most populated cities in the world. Right. Apologies to anyone from these cities if I miss one of them out. But we are talking about Tokyo, New York, Mumbai. My mind's gone blank. 2 of the ones that aren't in that top 11 are Delhi in India and Mexico City.
Right.
I think everything else in the top 10 is coastal.
Right.
New York is the 11th biggest city. Of course, that's around Long Island Sound.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So that's why they've become so important, the estuaries, because like for human use, ecologically, and I guess obviously that comes, economic and social and everything. So
yeah. And like it varies from country to country. Obviously some countries are landlocked, so don't have an estuary, but their cities could well be built on rivers or by lakes. Mexico City is by a lake. But in Australia, 86% of our population lives within 50 k's of the coast.
That's a huge amount. Well, that's
yeah. It's the vast majority of Australians live near the coast, and near the coast will largely be an estuary.
Yeah, I was going to say I was trying to think of all the major cities in Australia.
Yeah.
They're all around estuaries. Even in WA, our main towns, or we call them cities, I guess.
Yeah.
They're all on estuaries.
Yeah.
Or near an estuary.
Like the only one I can think of off the top of my head would be, say, Kalgoorlie, that's not, but that's built around a mine.
Yeah.
There's a reason why people populate an area, and estuaries provide, shelter, food, water, supply, connectivity. Hence, we love them. That's not even to mention the recreational, aesthetic, and cultural values.
Yeah.
Thrown in on top.
Also, it illuminates how much pressure gets put on an estuary, because obviously humans put the most pressure out of anything.
Yeah.
And that's actually what we're doing. It's just you're building a city right next to an estuary.
Absolutely. Like I saw your face when I said, imagine not flushing your toilet. You're one person.
Yeah.
Right? Imagine what's Tokyo, 30 million people?
Yeah. Well, people most of our sewage used to run into estuaries.
Absolutely. Yeah. All around the world. We can talk about the Thames as a classic example of how bad it got in a fairly well-developed country, Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Guess how many fish lived in a particular part of the Thames in the 1950s? This is species of fish. I'm
going to assume the 1950s is probably almost at its worst, because it...
Yeah. We're talking about this is an estuary in dire straits. Yeah,
I would say pretty low numbers. It's a number of species. Oh, it's a massive estuary, so 20.
Oh, it's not the whole. This is a stretch in an estuary.
Oh, okay.
But if you go out and you do your sampling, what's the number of species you get per sample?
3 to 4.
Yeah, and then on a particular field trip for an estuary,
20, 30. Yeah.
This was one.
Oh, wow.
So in 4 years of sampling, they caught a single species.
Oh, wow. That's really not good.
No. Was
it a goby?
No, it was actually the eel.
Oh.
The European eel, Anguilla.
Do they have one of the lungs so they can breathe air?
No, but they're more tolerant than most. I think the reason they escaped is that they don't actually live in an estuary.
Right.
They're catadromous, which is a bit of a weird word, right? But they spawn in the ocean in a place that we still don't know where they spawn.
Wow.
And the juveniles drift in currents back to Europe, right? Somewhere in the Sargasso Sea is where they are, like mid-Atlantic, right? I can't be more specific because we don't know.
Yeah.
Drift back in currents, then swim through the river through the estuary to get into fresh water. Right, so they're not like a resident fish species, which is probably why they were able to survive, because they lived in the environments either end of the estuary.
Yeah.
Not in the estuary. They were just traveling through.
Yeah.
Right. It's amazing. Yeah. One species of fish, 200 species of fish there now.
Right. So
and porpoises and dolphins.
That's a vast contrast from going from 1 to 200.
Yeah. Yeah. And the story goes, and I don't know how true this is, but you got the Houses of Parliament on the Thames estuary, right? You've seen it in a few movies where they get blown up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The politicians went out on the balcony to eat their lunch, and the river smelled like shit.
And
they're like, "Oh, we can't have our fancy sandwiches in this.
Yeah.
Maybe we should pass some legislation to clean up the river because it's affecting our lunch." And of course, well, that's me being very cynical, but you need that political will.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And then they're like, "Hang on, let's clean it up." Because the sewage system in London was built in the Victorian times. So that wastewater that you were talking about going into the estuaries, that's happened. And, the 1800s was a long time ago. And no matter how well they engineered it then, technology is better now than it would be then. But there's a lot more people now as well. So you've got more people using something that was developed a long time ago and designed to be upgraded. Right. And so it wasn't until they fixed the sewage issues that they got their fish back.
Wow. And there's still problems with like underlying sewage because they've got the E. coli bacteria. Was it the Thames? That was where the Olympics were, was it not?
Oh, that was the most recent one.
Yeah.
That was the Seine, which is in Paris.
Oh, yes, of course.
But yeah, well, London did have an Olympics in 2012.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the same problem then, wasn't it?
They did the swimming in Hyde Park.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, you're spot on. They in the Paris Olympics, they had to think very carefully about when they held the events and making sure there had been no recent rainfall, which in Northern Europe is pretty challenging. Right? You got to get the Olympics in this time. You can't control the weather because if you get that runoff, boom, before you know it, wastewater's in the estuary. People breathe it in or, accidentally swallow bits when they're in swimming events and get crook. And that happened, I think, in some of the warm-up events and trial events for the Paris Olympics.
Yeah, definitely heard a lot about that. So we keep alluding to catchments, and I just realised we haven't actually sort of defined what a catchment is, and because I know this blows a lot of people away, especially the catchment size for the Swan River, because it's not just the surrounding areas of the estuary. Well, it is, but to a lot larger scale than what people think. Like, what is a catchment? And can you give an example of like actually how big, say, the Swan River catchment is?
Yeah, sure. So imagine you're a droplet of water.
Yes.
Right. But you're not, you fall on the land. Where you make it to the sea is kind of the estuary you belong to, right? You've traveled through that as this droplet of water through that estuary. So if you put a droplet of water on every millimeter and work out where it went, that will be the catchment for that estuary. So the idea is that, a proportion of the water, because some of it goes to groundwater, but if it did run off into the estuary, where would it go? So it's the land with which the water that falls on it goes into the estuary. So, you'd find like you get like a tiny stream or a tributary, lots of them in the southwest are ephemeral. They're only there at part of the year. Makes it really challenging to work out where the catchments are. And so if you're an estuary, it's not only the water that falls on that bit of land that influences the estuary, it's everything else.
All the nutrients, all your fertilizers, pollution, everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And to throw it back to fish, because we know you like fish, salmon, right? Not the Australian salmon, but like the salmonids, right? The Pacific salmon, the Atlantic salmon. The way they go back to
what we call trouts.
Yes, well, trouts are part of that family. Yeah. Rainbow trout, brown trout. The way they go back to their home river is they taste the water.
Really?
Yeah. They got a sense of taste or smell like 1,000,000 times better than a human, 100,000 times better than a bloodhound, right?
Wow.
Yeah. But if you think about it, the way that they can pick up that smell is all the crap that washes in the catchment from that upper part, right? Every catchment is different. You got, different amounts of plants on there, different types of leaves going. It's like drinking a different cup of tea.
Yeah. Well, I know when people find gold, when they take it in to make sure you didn't pick it up on a different lease or to an extent, they can do chemical reports to find out where you've picked up that gold from to make sure it's like a legal bit of gold. So that's essentially similar to what it is. But obviously that area is specific to that area.
Yeah, it just shows you how influential the catchment is that the animals have evolved a method of working out where they're going based on what happens in the catchment and learning what that water tastes like that you're born in and then finding it at the other end of the estuary when you're in the ocean.
Wow.
Like pick up the trend from that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Even crazier I can tell you how they found that out.
Yeah, how did they find that out?
Back in the day where you could do slightly more obtrusive or very more obtrusive science than you could, they would knock out senses on fish and then see whether they went back to the place they should have gone. And
so how would they knock out a sense of the fish, like just block its nose or like?
Well, for this one, they melted chocolate in the nose of the salmon.
What?
Yeah. Yep. And then over time, like the chocolate would melt and the fish would be fine.
What?
But that's how they worked out, or one of the studies at least, that it's olfaction that gets fish back to where they want to go.
Yeah, right. That's crazy. Crazy in terms of how the fish find their way back, and crazy for scientists to do it that way. Wow. Okay. So how big is the catchment for the Swan River? Like, it's a lot bigger than what we think.
Yeah. So if you think about the Swan as, I don't know, it's debated in literature.
Yeah.
Somewhere between, you reckon 35 and some other papers up to 55 square Ks.
Which is, there's no way.
Yeah. But the catchment is the size of Tasmania.
I think it was 2 times the size of Tasmania.
Could be. That's what I remember it as without looking it up. I mean, I guess regardless of how big it is, the catchment is far larger.
Oh, it's massive
than the Swan Canning River is, and that's partly because the land here is quite dry, and the weep out and things like that. So, for large parts, that catchment is producing no rain. But then when you do get rain there, obviously our rain's quite seasonal, you get that washing off of stuff, which then goes into the rivers and then into the estuary. Could be, pollutants. It just could be like exhaust runoff from roads. Simple things like that. It's a big source of nutrients. We can't do anything about it. But you get that pulse of nutrients from the land into the estuary.
What happens when you clear a catchment? So it gets cleared for agriculture and all that.
Yeah. I think there's probably a generic premise. It would obviously differ from catchment to catchment. But in the Southwest, we've had a lot of clearing of land post-World War II. And what that does is, you're not getting that deep-rooted vegetation that keeps the water table down. You're replacing it with crops, that have shallower roots. Sometimes they're irrigated, sometimes they're not. That causes the salt table to rise. We call that dry land salinity here. And sometimes you can get that crystallizing on the surface. And eventually when that gets really bad, you can't farm. Or you have to farm like really salt-tolerant plants. But you're also not getting that soaking down of water when it falls on the catchment. So first off, clearing means that more water runs off. If you watch it rain in your garden, you can see that the soil takes it up, but on your driveway, it runs down into the street, right? The cleared catchment is far more like watering your driveway than it is watering your lawn. You get more instant runoff. But where you got the dry land salinity as well, that water that runs off is no longer fresh. It's going to pick up the salts that are crystallized in the soil and bring those into the estuary as well. And that's kind of how you get secondary salinization.
I know growing up on the farm, my granddad talks about when he was a young kid, like in the rivers that run through the farms, how they used to go catch marron and everything, and now the rivers are too salty. Like they've cleared a lot of land in that, and obviously this isn't just my family. This is going to many generations of family and different. It's been Australia wide. Like that's what's happened. Is like that you get lost that diversity in there, and then that's putting extra salt into estuaries.
Yes,
as well.
Yeah, it's very hard to get rid of salt. Like we've not really come up, as far as I know, with a good solution to dry land salinity. There's just areas that we can't farm now. So it's a problem on land for the catchment. We didn't know what we were doing when we did it. All right. There's a legacy effect with all of this. And that's kind of classic for estuaries, They've changed so much over time of all the people that are there. We can't undo what we've done that successfully because we've changed them out of all sites, Perth's the same as other cities like around the Pearl River, Tokyo, London, New York.
Yeah. Okay, going back to that, what was the biggest estuary in the world?
Okay, right. So, you and I used to think it was Chesapeake.
Yeah.
So, Chesapeake Bay is on the east coast of the US, and it borders a few places that people might know. So, Baltimore in Maryland, and Washington D.C. Those are two of the big cities. And that estuary is 11,600 square kilometers.
Wowzers.
So that is over 100 Peel Harveys.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And that's our biggest estuary. That's why we keep using Peel Harvey estuary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Biggest in the Southwest.
Yes.
There's probably some bigger ones up north.
Yeah.
Now, if we scale up, and we'll stay WA, some people consider Shark Bay an estuary, right? Shark Bay is 22,000 square kilometers in area. Right?
Wow.
I would argue it's not an estuary because it doesn't have river flow that actually dilutes it. There is an estuary that goes in to Shark Bay, but we don't get that dilution. There's kind of no bar type thing. People call it an estuary because it's kind of an inverse estuary. It gets more saline. It gets saltier than seawater the closer you get to land.
Well, I remember when I've been looking in that area, I would have called it where the delta of the river meets the bay of Shark Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the whole bay itself.
So that's 22,000 square kilometers, Shark Bay.
Right. So what's that, quarter of?
Well, that's twice Chesapeake.
Oh, right.
Let's say, you got Pure Harvey, our biggest in the southwest, times it by 10, that takes you to Chesapeake Bay. Right. And then if you double that, you get to Shark Bay. So that's 22,000 square kilometers. The biggest estuary in the world, if it was a country, would be ranked 18th.
Well,
Iran is the 17th largest country in the world at 1.6 million square kilometers. Yeah.
I'm going to have is this the Mediterranean Sea?
No, that's a sea.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the St. Lawrence River in Canada.
Really?
Yeah. So the St. Lawrence River, have you heard of it?
Trying to think. Is that near Vancouver Island?
No, other side.
Okay, no.
It's the east coast, not the west.
I don't think I have heard of it then.
Okay.
Which is very silly by me.
Yeah. Oh, to be honest, I hadn't thought about this estuary, but name me a lake in America.
Lake Michigan.
Yeah. So the St. Lawrence River drains the Great Lakes. Right. So this estuary gets 25% of all fresh water in the world.
Whoa.
Right. Yeah. So it's pretty big. It's also about 700 kilometers long. And its depth ranges between 200 and 500 meters. Yeah. Oh, 500 meters is fairly, there are far deeper estuaries than 500 meters. We can talk about that later on.
The fjords.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't realize they go that deep. That's okay.
Yeah. Estuaries, right?
We're talking our deep estuaries is like 20 meters. And these are going 500 plus.
Yeah. St. Lawrence estuary. It does discharge into a bay, so it kind of depends where you draw the line in the bay. But there are certainly articles in the literature that describe the St. Lawrence as the biggest estuary in the world and put a 1.6 million square kilometer thing on.
Wow.
When I was looking at the countries, Australia is about 7 million square kilometers. So 1.6 million, that's probably the size of it's bigger than some of the states.
Yeah.
One estuary.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you know the number of species in there? Did you ever see a paper that?
No, but they claim about 3,500 species in Chesapeake Bay.
Right. Wow.
But that's more than just fish.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Well, invertebrates would skyrocket that.
Yes. There's also plants.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
But more species isn't always good. So if I can take you from the the east coast of the US to the west coast, and we go to California, and we go to San Francisco, right? That's a tectonic estuary. It's an estuary created by the fault lines, right? So there was an earthquake, the land fell out in the middle, got flooded with seawater. Boom! That's how they got San Francisco Bay.
All right.
So that's an estuary, right? At last count, there's 300 introduced species in there. So if we take it back to the long history of human usage of estuaries, you're getting that spreading of trade. So a boat that goes from one part of the world to another part of the world, you get stuff that grows on the hull of the boat, which anyone who owns a boat has seen that. But these big ships take in water so that when they're not carrying cargo, they can sink lower down in the water and they discharge that water. And so those are just a couple of mechanisms that animals get spread. And so, yeah, when we're talking about numbers of species in estuaries, 300 species in San Francisco are introduced. They were finding 1.5 new species a year between the 1970s and the early 2000s.
This is plants, invertebrates, and fish?
Yeah.
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 Wow.
But I think we have, 9 freshwater species of fish in the Southwest?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they've literally got more introduced species than we have native species of fish in potentially the whole of Australia in freshwaters.
Yeah. That's crazy. This definitely going to my next question next. We're talking about different types of estuaries.
Yes.
Now, depends on how nuanced we have to want to go about the different types of estuaries, because we're talking about, let's start with broad ones. You've talked about tectonic estuaries.
Yeah.
How quickly did that happen? Sorry, do you know? Like,
I don't
is it like,
know.
would it be over hundreds of years of it like slowly sinking, or is it kind of like?
So these are along fault lines. So they're areas that get earthquakes fairly regularly. So it's not necessarily like we probably don't know if it's one or multiple quakes. Probably multiple quakes over time, just kind of lowers the land there. Have you been to Auckland, New Zealand?
No.
That's another tectonic estuary.
Right.
Yeah. Again, New Zealand's fairly active in terms of like movements of plates.
Yeah.
And, volcanoes and that kind of stuff through the Pacific Ring of Fire. So that's how you get those. Yes, but let's assume that humanity can agree on what is an estuary. We've then had to try and agree on how we classify estuaries. And so different people use different things. So we often talk about tidal range and estuary. People classify estuaries by tidal range. People do it by water circulation. And whether more water goes in or comes out of an estuary, that's a positive or negative estuary. But I think the obvious one for listeners is geomorphology, right? So you look at the underlying shape of an estuary and go, it looks like that. So at the top tier, they came up with fjords and fjords, right? So a fjord is where you've had a glacier retreat. So in the Southern Hemisphere, a good example of that would be Milford Sound in New Zealand and the Fiordland National Park there. And they tend to be either at the really high latitudes, so close to either pole. So we're going to get them in New Zealand and Chile in the Southern Hemisphere, and northern parts of Canada, Russia, Norway in the Northern Hemisphere, right? So the glacier retreats, that has a U-shaped hole that fills with water, and that's a fjord. They're really, really high relief on the sides, and they easily get to 1 kilometer deep. Right. There's I forget the Norwegian name, but its translated name is the King of Fjords in Norway. That is 1 kilometer deep for over 100 kilometers.
Well,
and it's 1.3 kilometers at its deepest.
But that can't be getting diluted that much.
Well, it gets the glacial melt at times. But you're right. The bottom bit, 1.3 kilometers down. No, that's salt water. And the problem is the mouth of those is about 20 meters deep. So you've got a really shallow mouth, and as the glacier is retreated, the glacier is pushing down sediment as it's carving its way through, but then it builds up at the mouth, which is called the sill.
Oh, so those mouths are only 20 meters deep.
Yeah.
And then it sinks.
Yes. Yeah.
Even Milford Sound?
I don't know specifically about Milford. But the Norwegian ones,
continuous, like,
well, it's as it's carved its way through. I guess it's pushed that material down, and that's formed the mouth. So yeah, fjords.
If this is going to quietly get off topic, but like if it's 1 kilometer down, and the mouth is only 20 meters deep, there must be huge stratification.
Absolutely.
Is the bottom hypoxic?
Can be very hypoxic for really long periods of time.
So there's not much living down there then.
No.
Interesting.
Yeah. If you go to anyone's been diving in Milford Sound, it's phenomenal.
Right.
Because, they measure rain in meters.
Yeah.
In that part of the world.
Yeah,
we measure in millimeters, 600 mils.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're talking about, I think it's like 12 to 14 meters.
Wow.
The rainfall that they get there. And it's pretty regular. So if you go diving in Milford Sound, the top of it is fresh.
Mm.
Right. And you go through the halocline, and then the water is clear at the bottom. And you only have to go a few meters down.
Yeah.
But it completely changes. And that's classic fjord. Really, really fresh water on top and salt water underneath.
Yeah.
In the Norwegian fjords, a bit different because they'll get, you'll have the melt of the seasonal melt of the glaciers, whereas, that part of New Zealand's not cold enough to get large amounts of snow around the thing. They get lots of rain. So that's a little different to the Norwegian ones in terms of how deep that layer will be.
Okay. Yeah. What's a fjord?
So fjords, same thing, but they're a bit more V-shaped rather than U-shaped. And the surrounding land is not as high a relief. So fjords are generally in mountain ranges. A fjord could be in a hilly area.
Right. Is that what you mean by relief?
Yeah, relief, how high up it goes. Yeah. So you're kind of just looking at a hilly, but not necessarily mountainous.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So Denmark has a lot of fjords.
Yeah.
So those are the first two. Some people debate, just as you did, are they really estuaries? Right. They also don't have a huge amount of sediment in them because they're carved straight through rock.
Wow.
Right. And so we think of an estuary as generally sandy, muddy.
Yeah.
But they're quite different, right? Then you've got your drowned river valleys. So they call those rias, right? Rias or abbas.
Yeah, I remember I was trying to argue we had a ria.
Well, the Swan is technically a bit of a drowned. Well, Hodgkin called it a drowned river valley.
Yeah,
which would be ria.
We'll remember. I was trying to call Quinn Head a ria. And ria because ria has a bar at the mouth, right?
No.
Okay. Was it Waichinukup?
Waichinukup is probably. Well, it's not a fjord because of the glacier, but it looks like a fjord because of the way the underlying geology is. Okay. That's why it's really hard to put these things in boxes. But yeah, Ria is like a classic drowned river valley. The words like Ria and Abba. Abba is the Welsh for estuary. So these names link back to a long history of human, what the local people called these things. Yeah. So yeah, I think Ria is more the Gaelic and Abba is more the Welsh.
Is it ABBA?
ABER.
Oh, okay. Okay, not the band ABBA.
No. That would be Sweden. I don't know if Sweden has Rias. They probably do.
Yeah.
So you got the Rias, then you got the coastal plain estuaries. Right, they tend to have low relief, flat land, big funnel shape. So the Severn estuary, Great Salmon estuary in Canada, they're classic ones, and they both tend to have big tides. Right, then where you don't have tides, that's where you get what they call the bar-built estuaries and the blind estuaries. So most of ours in the southwest would be all bar-built, and those that close off to the ocean would then be termed blind because there's no connection between the sea and the land. If we talk about the southwest, we can go into more detail on them. The final two are delta mouth, right? And the tectonic. So we tend to think of estuaries as always there. They're not. They get born and they live their life and they die. Now, we don't tend to think of ecosystems as dying through natural reasons, but estuaries do. They've got a life cycle of about 20,000 years, right? Some of our estuaries were changed fundamentally 3,500 years ago during the Holocene marine transgression when sea level changed.
Well, that's mainly our estuaries.
Oh, no, yeah. I'm sorry. I was talking in the southwest.
Yeah.
And some of our estuaries since then have died. Jeddah Lakes.
Yeah.
Classic example of that. And a delta is kind of like the end of life of an estuary. So we're talking about how important the catchment is and all the stuff that comes down the catchment. Well, lots of that is soil. That soil has to go somewhere. And, you can have a big wide mouth estuary at the start, but as it infills and infills and infills, a delta is one of the last things to exist.
Right. So they're like the end of the estuaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm assuming they can also transform from one type of estuary slowly into a different type.
The water would have to find another path.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, we're talking about 20,000 years, so no one's.
Yeah. Well, we've sped up the process in some estuaries where we've cleared land, and then
Absolutely.
like I think the prime example would be Shane Inlet, which is one of the estuaries I did my honours in under you, and I remember reading Hodgkin's book from when he was in there in the 1970s. It was he said it's like the mouth of the estuary is between basin of the estuary is like 5 meters deep. When I was there, it's about half a meter deep. Yeah. And the whole one side is still natural bushland, but the other side is all cleared farm, to the water's edge. Like that's sped up that process by a very exponential amount.
Yeah. In the case of Shane, it's been bad for the estuary. In the case of Cullum, just a little bit along the coast, and then we're talking Hopeton now, it's actually done the opposite. Right? So Cullum Inlet was not actually an estuary until the 1970s.
It was a lake.
It was a salt lake or permanently closed estuary.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't open for 70 years. Mm-hmm. And then that catchment clearing led to more runoff. And the sediment that had built up in the estuary lowered the depth of it, so it was easier to breach. And so that kind of became an estuary.
Well, there was a road that was going across the mouth.
Yeah, that lasted till, I think they rebuilt it following a storm in the 90s. And then it's got swept away again in 2017.
Yeah. And now they've got water that can transverse underneath it.
Yeah. And some nice big culverts.
Yeah.
We've learned our lesson from building across the bar a couple of times.
Yeah. Right. So I forgot to count. How many types of estuaries on that broad scale?
That's 8.
8 types.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've kind of got the 2 glacial ones in the fjords and the fjords, the 2 kind of what they call tide dominated estuaries, the Rias and the coastal plain or the funnel shaped estuaries, 2 kind of more wave dominated estuaries. So this basically just means there's more wave than there is tide. So areas with low tides with the bar built and the blind estuaries. And then you kind of got this group at the bottom, like the odds and sods, the deltaic estuaries and then the tectonic estuaries. And they're just so different to everything else.
Yeah.
Whereas the other ones have a thread that kind of puts them together.
Yeah.
So those are the 8, which some people call 6 if you get rid of the fjords and fjords.
And then as you go more regional, well, not too much regional actually, like even to Australia, you've limited the number of types of estuaries, but they go more nuanced into the classifications of different types.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the ones that I've spoken about are these like overarching global classifications. But, fjords are irrelevant in Australia. But we have other types of estuaries. And so, as you say, people have made a more nuanced classification that best fits the climatic and local geology of the area.
So one that we've worked on would be Hodgkin's, which is 4 different types of estuaries, or 2 different classifications of 4 different types of estuaries.
Yeah, he does one on geomorphology and then another one on bar.
Yeah. Can we talk about them?
Sure.
Yeah. So what are the 4 types? Going quickly, that doesn't go to the ones up north either. He didn't include that.
No, he's talking southwest. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the Drowned River Valley, Basin Estuary. Oh my God, I forgot the one. Riverine.
Yep.
Why have I forgotten the other one?
You live next to one. Where did you grow up?
Valley. Oh, Leschenault.
Mm-hmm.
Into Barrier. Yeah.
There you go.
Late night sampling last night. So they're the 4 overarching types, which I know we're working on changing that, but that's what we've worked off for the last few decades here.
Yeah, and lots of those kind of conform to those ones we spoke about earlier. Like, the Drowned River Valley is kind of a RIA, and the Basin ones is kind of a bar-built / blind estuary. Yeah.
And then we've looked at the mouth of the estuary, the connectivity to the ocean, because that's obviously one thing that influences fish a lot is the connectivity to the ocean through salinity or through access, whatever. So that's why is it? And then I know we've gone down the classification route, but why is it important to classify these different types of estuaries?
Yeah, okay. So if we think of estuaries as crucially important for humanity for various reasons, right? Really, really important biologically for the animals that live there, right? But then we've kind of messed it up through our human uses of estuaries, right? So you want to put in a management regime in order to mitigate any effect, make sure the estuary is giving those ecosystem goods and services that it can. Every estuary is different, right? And so if you can classify things together, you can be a little bit more generic. So there is a famous quote in estuarine science, which basically goes along the lines of estuaries. Estuaries are this mixing point, and you have so many variables that no two estuaries are alike. So it's actually really hard to define them. You don't know whether you're looking at something that's real or something that's not. Like the Swan is very different to, say, a Tasmanian estuary or an estuary up north, or a European estuary. So if you can come up with locally relevant classifications, you can see what works in one type of estuary management-wise, let's say reducing nutrients, that kind of stuff, and apply that to others.
Right. Yeah. We've talked about how the classification or different types of estuaries globally, they're extremely diverse. How different are they from like Northern Hemisphere to Southern Hemisphere? Because that was why the definition of an estuary was so different, because the Northern Hemisphere didn't quite relate to our Southern Hemisphere estuaries.
Yeah.
Is the main difference because of tides?
Yes. So the classical definition of an estuary is kind of one where you do have big tides and an open connection to the ocean, right? That's true for many of the estuaries in Europe and in the US. But there are some estuaries in those places that are much more like the ones we have here. So yeah, if you were stereotyping the Northern Hemisphere estuaries, they're big, wide estuaries with a big tidal range. And that's not what we get in the Southwest or South Africa, parts of California, Mexico, Texas. They're quite similar to ours. But then you can also go to Chile, where they've got 12-meter tides.
How does the macro, like these big tides, influence the biology inside them compared to ours that are we call our estuaries microtidal because we've got really small tides, but they have huge tides. How does that influence their fauna?
It's I think it's one of the biggest factors that controls an estuary. Just think back to the name estuary coming from the Latin for tide, right? So with the tide, you're getting this huge amount of water come in and out. That water is going to suspend the sediment, right? So if we just think back, work our way through the food chain of an estuary. Seagrass. We have lots of seagrass in our estuaries. It's a plant. It needs light. When you have a big tide, you don't get light, right? So the macrotidal estuaries often don't have any seagrass, right? Or it's out in the ocean rather than in the estuary. They have seagrass in the Northern Hemisphere. So what you do have is you have these emergent rocks, right? And so those rocks with all that scour can have kelp and things like that on. So some of the things that we find at the beach, like the echolonia kelp on the rocks, they have in an estuary and they don't have the seagrass. So the plant and the substrate is completely different.
The primary producers are completely different.
Yeah. They are they are not worried about algal blooms in those estuaries, right? The Swan went lime green in 2001, right? Because of an algal bloom in summer. They just don't get the quality of light because of the sediment in the water, which is natural, right? You don't get the phytoplankton blooms. We get that here because we have that clarity of light, right? When the tide goes down, you get these big mud flats. And earlier on, you spoke about like the migratory birds and how important those are. Well, the bird fauna that we get in estuaries here, they tend to be diving birds. Right?
Yeah, like shags or cormorants.
Cormorants. Yeah. Pelicans.
Terns.
Yeah, they're diving into the water. What if the water is like, a cup of tea?
Yeah.
Sorry, not a cup. Like filled with sediment. You're not going to want to open your eyes and swim around and find anything. So they don't really get the diving piscivorous fish-eating birds in Northern Hemisphere estuaries, right? What they get are lots of the invertebrate feeding birds.
The shorebirds.
The shorebirds, yeah, which we do have some here. Vaswana up in Peel Harvey are important for that. But also so are some of the inland salt lakes as well. Lake Eyre is really important. And globally around the world, flamingos.
Really? We used to have flamingos, right?
We used to have flamingos, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they went extinct about 3,000 years ago. We're not entirely sure why.
Right.
But the Camargue in the microtidal estuaries in France, they have flamingos. Africa's famous for flamingos, and you get them in the Americas
Right.
as well. So Australia is one of the only places, but fossil evidence suggests that we did have them.
Yeah.
All right. And of course, those are eating, filtering out phytoplankton with their upside down bill. So again, that's like that high residence time. So the longer water stays in an area, it doesn't get transported to sea by the tide, the more phytoplankton you can get with the clear light. Makes great food for birds that eat that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So that's kind of like the macrophytes and the birds. And then for the invertebrates and the fish, you get lots of species that spend their whole lives in estuaries here because they're relatively stable. Yeah, salinity changes a bit over longer time periods, like seasonal changes, and of course up and down the estuary. But literally where I was in the UK the other week, it was 35 parts per thousand when the tide was in, and it was 0 when the tide was out.
Mm.
And that's not because there was no water there, because the only water that's coming down is fresh water.
Mm.
So the change of environment on a tidal cycle, and they were having 2 high tides, 2 low tides a day, so every 6 hours, was completely different.
Mm.
So that stresses out fish. You got to be rock hard to be able to live permanently in that environment and tolerate the salinity change like that every
Are the
6
fish
hours.
living in that environment permanently, or are they moving in and out with the tide? I imagine a lot would be.
Most of them move out. There are very few species that live permanently in there, and the ones that do tend to be small benthic fish that live in burrows called gobies.
Yeah. Okay. Love the gobies.
Yeah. Yeah. They get like things like the mullets and what they call brim.
The BRIM or BR?
BREAM. So
same as ours.
Yeah. But they call them brim.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And some of the Porgies, dentex, which is a sparrid.
Yeah.
Like those stuff move in and out. And some of the gadoids and things like that, because they don't want to, they're marine fish. They don't want to be in the estuary when the tide goes out and the water gets a bit fresh. Whereas here it's a much more stable environment, particularly in summer. So we get lots of species that live in our estuaries, which means if we lose those species, we don't get them back again. If they've got alternative nursery areas like these marine fish, you can have an estuary where the tide goes out. You know, you have a horrible chemical spill, right? Everything dies. Well, you're going to get seeding of those fish again from marine waters in the future. We're not going to get that here. So our estuaries are much more vulnerable because of that.
Well, we're dealing with hypersalinity, which we can touch base in a little bit later.
Sure.
So that was in terms of macro versus microtidal, we've gone now birds, primary producers, birds, fish. Is that everything that's like biologically different between them?
Those are the major things. With the invertebrates, you kind of get the major groups, but they tend to be smaller here.
Right.
Yeah. And that's to do with the propensity for natural stress. So if anyone Googles the gooey duck, right, this is a big bivalve with a siphon, and you see videos of people going down to get it, and like there'll be someone holding onto someone's legs.
The one with the strange thallus?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. The one that looks like an anatomical part of the male anatomy.
Yeah.
Yep. Like that's a really big bivalve, right?
Yeah.
Live for a long time. You need a really stable environment for that to live, because long-lived species grow slowly, right? And if they need to survive for a long time to get that size. We don't really get the big invertebrate species in our estuaries. Like most of the worms are tiny. The mollusks are tiny. They live in the sediment.
Is that just because I was going to say it's not evolutionary, is it? Why are they so small here?
Well, we don't get those long-lived species in the southwest.
What are we talking about long-lived? Because Alan was talking about the freshwater clam or freshwater mussel, which is a clam, that lives up to 50. I think he said 50 years. or
Yeah.
90 years. Like that's technically long-lived compared to everything else is only a
yeah.
few years.
Absolutely.
What's long-lived for those? Like,
It's entirely species dependent, right?
okay.
But like earlier on, we spoke about us not growing, throughout our life. So we get bigger if we ate more food, right? With fish and invertebrates, they grow throughout their life. So the bigger species live for longer. And they also have different reproductive strategies as well. So like lots of our invertebrate species will live for, say, 3 months, right? Some of the medium-lived species will live for a year. Some of the longer-lived species will live for 5-10 years. But we're not like the freshwater mussel is kind of a bit different because that's actually a stable environment.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But the moment it goes salty, those mussels are cooked anyway.
Yeah.
So
that's why they're all under pressure at the moment.
Yes, exactly. But that environment is stable in the sense that it has to be freshwater.
Yeah.
Whereas with the estuaries, there's so much more of a dynamic habitat. The environmental variables change. Right. And estuary is also a naturally stressed area. It's a very hard area to grow up in. So throw on anthropogenic stress, stress caused by humans, and it gets worse. And what happens is the size of species is smaller. So ours are just naturally smaller here because the stresses on those estuaries are a bit different. And that's how they've adapted to survive.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you think that estuaries are probably one of the most important ecosystems?
Wow. I would say yes. But then, someone could come up to me and go, well, you're an estuarine biologist. Of course you're going to say it's good. To which I would refer you to the work of Robert Costanza in 1997. So if you want to get political support, right, those people in the House of Parliament in England, river smelt like shit, let's clean up the river, right? You want to go to Parliament and you say, right, this is the economic value of this ecosystem. Right, you alluded to that with the Peel Harvey estuary earlier. Robert Costanza is an environmental economist. And in 97, he wrote a famous paper in Nature where they valued all of the ecosystems in the world. Guess which one was ranked number one for dollar value per hectare?
Estuaries.
Estuaries. More than coral reefs. More than seagrass beds.
We have a lot more estuaries.
Yeah, a lot more area of estuaries than coral reefs. Subsequently, he's revised that, and coral reefs are now higher than estuaries.
Oh, damn.
Yes. But that's mainly from coastal protection.
Okay.
Like when we had this tsunami in Indonesia in about 2006, that kind of really hit home to people the value of having intact coral reef. Right. It took an absolute pounding from the tsunami, but it meant that the human infrastructure didn't. Right. And that's really expensive to build. So when you're valuing an ecosystem, in order to engineer something to have a coastal defense would cost you a lot of money. The coral reefs do that for free. So at one point, 1997, estuaries were the number one ranked ecosystem for dollar value in the world. It's now changed a little bit because coral reefs have come up.
Yeah.
But I like the 97 version.
Me too. But that's with a dollar value. What about ecologically? Because they seem to have a lot more services than...
So what they've done is the dollar value is incorporating those ecosystem services. Right, that's how they valued the ecosystem, right? Because, right, just for example, you've got up this morning and there is sunlight. Right? We take that for granted, right? Imagine if we had to make the sun, what that would cost, right? So that nutrient recycling that goes on in estuaries, that fisheries production, that cultural value, they valued all of those in what would it cost to replace those.
Right.
So it is those ecosystem goods and services.
Yeah.
And from that, estuaries were at one point number one in the world.
I would have thought it still kind of is. Like, so a podcast I did with Shannon, she talked, she mentioned, and I started Googling after, is that the Great Barrier Reef, it was valued at $56 billion, right? The whole Great Barrier Reef.
Yep.
Then Peel Harvey estuary is valued at $20 billion. That's one estuary. We've got a lot of estuaries. We've only got essentially two major reefs,
Yeah. Okay. So
coral reefs in Australia.
yes, what you've done there is fallen into a bit of a trap, which is very easy to do when it comes to biologists talking about economics.
Yes.
Okay. You have to compare like with like. And surveys, when you're comparing one survey to another survey, don't really do that very well at all. Right. So you need to have the same dollar value for services and then the same benchmark and include the same services. Because all these things, all these calculations have multipliers, right? And they're all woolly. How many people visit the Great Barrier Reef?
Oh, it'd be millions.
But that varies from year to year.
Yeah.
Right. Take, cost of living crisis, rising inflation. Well, people from Australia may not travel to Queensland. So you still got the Queensland tourism, but you may get less domestic travelers. You may get more international travelers depending on countries and things like that. So your dollar value on the tourism of that is based on the number of visitors. That's not constant. All right. Is anyone actually measuring these things?
No.
So when you do one study, one person may go, well, I'm including A, B, and C, and these are my multipliers for that. Right. What does the average person spend on, say, a tourism trip on a boat in the Great Barrier Reef to, say, one of the cruises in Mandurah? So I think one of the reasons why Costanza's work is so good is because he and the rest of the team have valued every ecosystem the same and based these on global averages, right? Rather than comparing one thing there to one thing there. Because they're comparing like with like for the purpose of making that class, for the purpose of making that comparison. Whereas normally, like we're going, right, how much is the barrier reef worth? Boom, how much is the peel worth? And you may include different things. There's also subjective biases. Like what we don't want to say is, oh, the barrier reef's worthless. So people tend to put in things that they like. This isn't an inherent bias in that we love what we do. We love our ecosystems.
Yeah.
So we think of absolutely everything you could do to value them. Whereas being a bit broader and objective and trying to value those ecosystems is probably better for a comparison. But I mean, that still says that estuaries and coral reefs are, right up there in terms of their ecosystem goods and services.
Estuaries don't get the publicity that coral reefs do, though.
Or seagrass.
No, seagrass does.
No. So I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. Everyone loves seagrass.
Yeah. And estuaries are just regarded, they're sort of like pushed to the side, like, nah.
Yeah.
I think everyone thinks of them as what I alluded to at the start of the podcast, and just like that, almost toilet.
Yeah. I was going to use the word shithole, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because it's what it is, right? Half of its value is recycling nutrients.
Yeah.
They get washed in.
Yeah.
But the moment there's no one there to flush your toilet, you think, I wish there was an ecosystem that did that because I do not want to do this.
Yeah, and then now they're they are not now, but they've always been one of the most important ecosystems that we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Then, yet they are regarded as one of the most degraded aquatic ecosystems.
Yeah, temperate estuaries.
Oh, just temperate estuaries.
Yes, that's the quote in the Jackson paper. Temperate estuaries. One of the reasons for that is where is the world's population centered in estuaries, and the urbanization and the industrialization, it tends to be temperate more than tropical. Right. So again, we're thinking of those big cities, we're talking about, say, London, Tokyo, New York, Paris, some of those ones in the China, and then in the southern hemisphere, they're all temperate. Yes, I mean, there are developments, but when Jackson makes that generalization, they're talking about temperate.
So what are the major pressures on estuaries then? I'd imagine like globally, there's a few similar ones, but then I know we're dealing with something different here in Southwestern Australia.
Yeah. So Kenish in 2002 did a global lit review on pressures on estuaries. And his top one was habitat use. So this is the loss of habitat. Right. So let me throw a few figures at you. 29% of all global seagrass beds have been lost. We've lost, I think it's 35% of all mangroves since 1980. So of what we had in 1980, we've lost 35% of that now. We've lost 85% of shellfish habitat globally. Right? If that was happening on a terrestrial landscape, it would be all over the news.
Mm.
Right. And I mean, we have lost a lot of terrestrial habitat, particularly like clearing for farmland. And that's just been a legacy of a long time. But what I'm talking about is like mangroves, salt marshes, seagrass beds, and shellfish reefs, all in the last 50, 70 years.
Why?
It's a number of things, but some of it comes to the other pressures that Kenish spoke about.
Just going back, those things you've just listed, they're all similar in like filtering organics, stabilization, as you said, habitat as well. Like
so they would be, say, coastal defense, utilization of nutrients. They'll strip nutrients from the water and help in recycling. They're also going to be habitat for animals and provide food either through organic material or home for other things in the food chain, right? But we're clearing a lot of those lands, right? If you go back and have a look at photos of estuaries from back in the day, I was talking to students about the Loire estuary in France. They used to have islands in the middle of it. Now it looks like a canal, right? We've encroached on estuaries as well. You know, like we've reclaimed land. You know, there are airports in the world that are technically below sea level. There are large bits of countries that are technically below sea level. We've reclaimed that land from the estuary. And we've also cleared that land as well. You know, cleared salt marshes and things like that. So that was Kenish's big one. And then his number 2 was eutrophication. Now, technical term, but it basically means excess nutrients. Right? One of the big things that happened was the harbor process. So the harbor process was invented in the 1920s, 30s in Germany. And that's how we made fertilizer.
Hang on. Okay. Explain to me.
So we developed the chemistry to be able to make fertilizer. And that meant that we could put fertilizer onto land to get a higher yield of crops, right? Because post World War II, populations exploded. We got to feed everyone. Put your fertilizer on, get more food. Lots of that fertilizer washes off into rivers, into estuaries. That's how you get that excess nutrients. Right. So that was his number 2. Number 3 was sewage.
So what is that called, a harbor process?
No, the harbor process is named after someone who made the chemical process of producing fertilizer.
Okay, sorry. I was thinking like harbor in a harbor.
No. Yeah. Someone's name.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the chemist or someone who made it.
Yeah.
Number 3 was sewage. Right. And then in the paper, he lists eutrophication as a symptom of the sewage. But there's also other things that come down. You mentioned E. coli earlier on. So yes, that's not just nutrients. In sewage, you get the nutrients plus pathogenic bacteria and other things. Interestingly, introduced species was number 7.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's algae and sponges and invasive species.
Yeah, yes. But Michael Kenish was also based in the US, where they've got good records on introduced species.
Okay.
So maybe more prominent in his mind when he did it.
But this is list of pressures.
This is list of global pressures on estuaries as of circa 2002, which was the last big review of this. So what I've mentioned, there's a big one that you're expecting me to say that I haven't said yet, which is climate change. Sea level rise was the only one in the top 10, and it was at number 8. And lots of the problems with sea level rise is actually loss of habitat, that coastal squeeze that we spoke about earlier. But, you know, I think that this was done in 2002. We are now in 2025. And a lot of people would put climate change much higher, myself included. Now where it is an existential threat. Overfishing was 5.
Right. Yeah. I'd imagine that would have been. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, that's still probably right up there. But climate change was really low. And I think that's quite high. And another one that's really come up is water usage. Abstraction of water. And we don't really think about that too much. right?
But they definitely would extrapolate the climate change impacts.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, if we were in virtually any other state, we'd be talking about the Murray-Darling, right? Which goes through Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and South Australia, 4 bits. And that's incredibly contentious, the water use on there. And so, yeah, we don't think about it too much here in Western Australia, but they do there. And it's one of the biggest pressures in other parts of the world. South Africa being a big one. Right. But, you know, we do dam the Canning River, has a dam on it. And, you know, we're talking about building a desalination plant in Albany. Albany gets lots of its water from rivers. And so does the town of Denmark and Walpole. And, you know, Denmark.
How would this desalination plant affect? Do they not just abstract from the ocean?
Oh, no, sorry. Because of climate change and the water decreasing.
Sorry.
In order for Albany to have water into the future, desal plant is on the table. It was just, it was debated the other day, but there was a public backlash to where they wanted to put the desal plant in Albany. But that's all because we can't take any more water from the rivers. The rivers don't have any more to give us. And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I remember Denmark having water trucks.
I do remember hearing this.
Or
it was either Denmark or a different town. I know Peaceful Bay, I think definitely did.
Yeah. So, we don't think about abstraction, but it happens. And so those are some of the biggest ones. Of course, because estuaries are affected by everything that goes on in the catchment, plus the climate, plus the ocean, the individual pressures on an estuary are all different, which again makes them really hard to manage. But globally, those are the big ones like habitat loss, excess nutrients, fisheries, climate change, water abstraction, and introduced species.
Southwest Australia, we have another problem, which is probably our biggest one. Would it not? Would it be?
Yes. So you're alluding to hypersalinity. Yeah, which is really driven by those other things. So yes, you're spot on. Why do we get that? Well, we've got a shift in climate. Large parts of the southwest are predicted to get less rain, particularly winter rain, which is when most of our rain falls. And the habitat loss in the catchment, the dryland salinity, secondary salinisation is causing that as well. So, yeah, I think those two combine and hypersalinity is the result.
And hypersalinity is increasing so much that we're losing species because they can't survive in that salinity.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head earlier on when you spoke about, going around the banks of an estuary and seeing no life. Yeah.
Climate change would be an interesting factor because if you got sea level rise, that might then breach some of these bars of these estuaries. It's like we don't really know. Some of these bars are too high for that to happen, or the fact that the rate of sea level rise is not going to exceed the rate of hypersalinity in these estuaries.
Yeah, you're right. It's this trade-off, right? Between how much does rainfall decline to how much does sea level rise.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like the other end of a seesaw with the bar in the middle as to whether the bar stays or goes.
Right. I've looked at the question sheet here and we've only covered about a quarter of the question.
I did think it was pretty ambitious.
Yeah. So this is going to be a multiple part episode. So I know you're a very busy man, so I'll get you back on another side. But I think we've covered a great area today of what is an estuary, types of estuaries, and quickly touched on a bit of the biology and the pressures on estuaries. I think the next podcast we'll focus on the biology in estuaries.
You can go below the Hallock line. We just scratched the surface of our fjord.
Yes, yeah. And just obviously being under your wing for many years, I know that you know these things super interesting. And I know you've got some really interesting facts and everything coming up. So I really want to get onto that. And I don't want to just not do it justice by trying to put it all together in about 15, 20 minutes. And so I think I'm going to wrap it up here and follow up with this in another stage so we can give this a really good thorough review of estuaries. But I do have I'm going to reshape that question of the ones I ask in every episode. Well, I'm gonna if you had unlimited money and time, what would you do?
Can I say retire?
No.
I think if you want to understand estuaries, you have to understand estuaries, and because they're all so different, it means going to them all, right? And so what I would do is, have an estuarine roadshow, travel around the world to meet the people who have strong cultural ties to estuaries. Talk to traditional owners. What is the estuary to you? How is it like now? What was it like in the past? Build up that local ecological knowledge on top of talking to scientists, but literally talking to everyone around the world to try and come up with something that's globally overarching. Because if we're going to tackle climate change, it's going to happen in different ways and means in different places.
Yeah.
And so, we've, kind of failed to get a definition of an estuary because we need to get everyone in a room. So I travel the world, talk to everyone.
That sounds like an amazing
try and learn a little bit, because everyone has a story to tell and a different insight. And that's really important into incorporating all that.
Yeah, that sounds kind of feasible in a way as well. That's not too out there. That's not possible.
Yeah, well,
I know it's like the hardest part would be trying to connect everybody. But collaborations are getting more and more.
I think people are really passionate about estuaries more than just us.
Yeah.
And so, everywhere I've ever been in the world, people are happy to talk estuaries.
Yeah.
I visited my dad in Wales, which is where in one of the estuaries with the biggest tidal ranges. We saw a coastal waterfall.
Yeah.
We also saw a man-made gorge at the end of his for the estuary that's at the end of his street. Right. He didn't realize that was built in for flood management to stop his house flooding. Yet he's a member of the local flood defense scheme.
Right.
Right. And so people see these things and don't always realize the significance, but it's important to them for different reasons. So, I think everyone's kind of happy to talk estuaries, particularly in this changing world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope this starts to get, helps increases it. My last question.
Yep.
What is your least favorite type of estuary, since that's what we sort of covered today?
I'm going to cop out of this one and say I love all estuaries equally. And
it doesn't. The least favorite type just doesn't mean you don't like them. It just means you rate these other ones better.
So I did my PhD in Broke Inlet, which is was regarded by the government as the least disturbed estuary in the southwest and in the least disturbed in the entire country. And then I went to work on the Vasswannerup, which is one of the most modified estuaries. So you kind of go from one where there's not even much seagrass because there's so little nutrients in there, to the Vasswannerup that was once described as the most grossly enriched wetland in maybe Australia or certainly Western Australia.
Okay.
Right. But they all have challenges. And so, yes, that estuary is nowhere near as aesthetic as the other ones, but we can make it better. And so even the ones that are a bit grubby, we can improve and have success on. So everyone is a new challenge. And so, like my dogs, I love them equally.
Okay, I won't press too much on that question then. Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
No problem.
There's going to be a follow-up with this because I knew I was going to be blown away about this, and we've literally only got through a quarter of the questions.
I actually only prepped the first few questions because
right, yeah,
I know what we like.
Yes, yeah, and I'm very excited for the next one, which we will just focus just on the biology, which will be a good.
We'll talk fish and fishing.
Yeah, yes, yeah, awesome.
World records as well.
Oh yes, we didn't even cover that. Damn. Next time.
Yeah, next time.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Power Mountain